Hey,
With-
Dr. Kimberly, it says we're live, but one of the corners, I think it's that corner now.
One of the corners, one of those corners. We got a new corner.
I gotta figure myself out in this new fandangled StreamYard thing.
I think it's pretty cool.
I think it's cool too. It's just new. You know me and change. I'm not a fan of it.
I was like, oh, are you calling me? No.
I'm not calling you. You calling me?
No.
Better turn my phone off.
Wait a minute. Let's turn our phones off here. Who is that calling? We don't know. Hey, Josh. Josh says, hey, guys. Hey, Josh.
Hey, people are already zooming in.
And guess what? We can actually put it up there on the screen. Look at that.
Nice. I've got my two screens here. So I'm looking like that duck that's also up in the corner.
You know what? They really go there talk about the duck goose.
It's a duck up there. I'm not making this up. Every new technology needs a mascot. So I don't know what our mascot is, but wait, I do know who our mascot is. Purple rain, purple rain. No, don't make me sing. Mute him quick, folks. He's singing. Where's Purple Rain?
Sing it. He's down here. Oh my gosh, you got a compliment on your glasses, April.
Oh, thank you.
We're already busting to our guest, which, you know, in Michigan, I don't know if it's where everyone is watching. It's primary day in Michigan or election day. There's very little on the ballot, but if there is, get out and vote. You still got to 8 o'clock Eastern time. And so if you're in Michigan, make sure you're voting. And if you have trouble voting, let us know from an accessibility perspective, because our Secretary of State, we have a long line of secretaries of state that have prioritized equal access for voting. So that was Terry Lynn Land, Ruth Johnson, and now Jocelyn Benson. So if you have any trouble voting from an accessibility perspective, please let us know or call. Who should you call, Dr. Kimberly?
Disability Advocates of King County.
Or your local CIL, because that's us. But if you're up in the UP, SAIL, we don't want to give you the whole list. But that's in Michigan. If you're not in Michigan, you might not be voting today, so we don't want to confuse you.
We don't. But today, we're traveling all the way to Tucker, Georgia, by way of Hawaii.
Hawaii?
Yeah.
Yes.
What? What?
Yes.
I'm from Hawaii. Relocated to Georgia about 5 years ago. So
nobody moves from Hawaii back to the mainland.
Well, you know, a gallon of milk is like $7, and it's really expensive. So the money goes.
I thought everyone makes $1 million in Hawaii.
Yeah, well, you know, it's all in perspective of, you know, you got the beach right there, but then you have, you know, you leave grocery store and you might have 2 bags of groceries and spend $100. So it's in, you know, when you put everything into perspective, it's a little bit different.
Well, as a small segue in today's topic, I hope you still have some free places to stay in Hawaii when you go back to visit.
Oh yeah.
All right. Family and friends.
We'll talk after the show.
Well, you know, again, as long as you have some family and friends who are still willing to let you stay, I mean, that's what it's all about, right?
Oh yeah. It's getting there. It's the 7-hour plane ride getting there. That's the tough part.
Can't you kayak across the deep blue sea?
You know what?
It kind of be like
my arms are strong enough. I go to the gym, but I don't know if my arms are strong enough to kayak.
It would be like a glamping adventure.
Are we back to that again?
We're never leaving it. I spoke with one of our former guests, Father Mark Shibish, who still unfortunately is dealing with his long haulers. And I invited Mark to go camping with me, and he has the same response as you do, Dr. Kimberly.
What?
He said He said, if there's a hotel by the campground, I'll go with you.
Imagine that.
So you and April are going to kayak across the Pacific Ocean. I'm not up for that. That's like exercise. I don't go to the gym. I'll sleep in a tent, but I will not exercise. I'm just saying. Sorry, Rudy, if you're listening. So
yeah, that's a funny one. That's a funny one. But no, seriously though, I do have a question. What does accessibility look like in Hawaii? So, like, does everybody have, specially adaptive wheelchairs and, I call them walking sticks or, a walk assist for those persons who are visually impaired or no vision, low vision. So how do they get around on the beaches?
You know what? Surprisingly, I started learning a little bit of, different things as I got more involved, moving to Georgia. But say, for instance, our sidewalks there, a lot of the areas, tourist areas, they're pretty newly built. And so, with their newer construction, they, have to make sure their guidelines, are meeting the ADA compliant. And so it seems like a lot of the shops and newly built centers that had a lot of, tourist activity were accessible. As far as the doors go, just the elevation of the sidewalks themselves, even I would say, like, crossing the street, they have like, sounds for the visually impaired. So they'll have an audio kind of clicking to allow you to know how many seconds are going across and, different things like that. A lot of transport in Hawaii was by way of moped, like electric scooter. And so it seemed like, just from the sidewalks, the ramps going up, and just the streets in general, they really tried to keep them as, level, keeping, them free of potholes and, just, to get around. There's a lot of foot traffic there as well. So keeping all of that into, consideration, they tried to really maintain them as best as possible. There was nothing in specific that, comes to mind that was done differently in Hawaii, but I'm sure they had, their own set of, just because of so many, people were on skateboards a lot. There was a lot of, pedestrians and things like that, and just the way of their streets. They had a lot of one ways. It's just a little bit of a different structure there that I learned. Even just driving in Hawaii was just a little bit different, but yeah, just overall, just the newly built construction and their standards, they seem to be really on top of, the accessibility, making sure they were compliant.
Well, I do believe you, April, but I just think we have to send Dr. Kimberly and Stanley out to do a first-hand accessibility audit of the Hawaiian Islands.
Yeah.
Well, I'll come along. I'll come along. And
all right. I think we'll just send you all out as a cool entourage to make sure our friends in Hawaii are doing what we really think they're doing.
Yeah.
Trust and verify. Trust and verify.
I like that. Trust and verify. Well, we want to say thank you so much to T.E. Smith, who is watching all the way from Chicago, Illinois. And he happens to be an attorney. And I think that maybe if we have some accessibility issues, he might be the person that we might need to talk to if a building is not accessible. But we're going to fly all the way back from Hawaii, and we're going to come on over to Georgia. And our guest today is Miss April Brown. And we're just talking about it on Tuesday. Let's talk about it Tuesday. And we're talking about fair housing and accessibility. And is it really fair for those persons with a diverse ability? You are a property manager for some commercial properties. And I guess that would absolutely mean you may be talking about apartment buildings, or someone wants to get a condo. And what happens if they advertise and they say, hey, we're accessible for you, especially for those persons in a wheelchair, because that's usually the first accessibility that most folks do is wheelchair as it relates to any type of diverse ability. And they'll say, hey, This is 0 steps. But guess what? There's a lip that's about 3 inches high that I can't get over in my manual wheelchair, or if I'm in a motorized wheelchair, you have to get a good running start, and you have to start back. Maybe a couple of feet to go, whew, bam. And if you're like me, I've done that, and just to try to get over the entryway, and I have run into a wall.
No.
So what do we do when they advertise, oh yeah, we have 0 step entry, but it's not really 0 step?
So it's a little bit of a different perspective. As I mentioned before, I worked in actual residential property management for a period of time in which the residents would come to me themselves and say, hey, I just moved in. I need, these accommodations. This is what I need, whether it's a parking spot, they need to be designated, or, sidewalk, elevation is not quite, compliant, or even things on the inside of their, apartment that we'd have to, either see if they have an apartment available that will meet their needs. Otherwise, getting with my construction team, maintenance, and figuring out what adjustments need to be made. And that's on more so the residents, me dealing with them hand in hand, and them, just building a relationship and just seeing what it is that I can do for them to make them more comfortable and make sure they have everything that they need. As far as commercial goes, I have retail shopping centers right now. And so it's a little bit different as far as responsibility goes, as for instance, the common area, parking lots, sidewalks, that would be the landlord's responsibility, which is, I would be considered on the landlord's behalf. And so maintaining those, the parking stalls, making sure that, every year that the striping and the parking, lot is even, is visible. It has, those handicap accessible, parking stalls, for every so many stalls. And it's really based on the property, but, however many stalls we have, making sure we have, designated amount or percentage of stalls that are, for, accessibility, van access as well. And so a lot of times, I've had patrons of the shopping center just reach out to me and say, hey, I was at your shopping center and I noticed you don't, there's no ramps, or, the bollard, the painting of it wasn't a bright color, it wasn't indicating that it was for handicap parking. And, and I try and do, regular inspections. I have out-of-state properties as well, so I try and get to those monthly. And I have a whole list of things that I just want to make sure. And ADA is at the top of the list, making sure everything is visible, it's needed. Whatever's needed is taken care of, whether it's lighting and just overall. The concrete, the asphalt is intact. There are no issues as far as accessibility. Now, when it comes to tenant spaces, for instance, let's just say we had a dollar store as one of my tenants. Based on the lease language, that would determine the who would remediate when it came to alterations that were needed on the inside of the space, because at that moment in time they are accessing, they are leasing the premises, so they do have responsibility for the interior. But ultimately, if there was a claim filed, if there was a, it was more so approached in that way, ultimately landlord would be the one to ensure that everything was taken care of. But it really just depends on the lease, the type of lease, that it is, who's responsible for what. But in most cases, the common area maintenance, the tenants do contribute to that portion of the maintenance. And so on the landlord's behalf, with the contribution of the tenants, we can all work together to make sure everything is taken care of as far as all those common areas. So anything common area of the center of the property, I would be the one to make sure it's up to standard. If I did receive something, I say I received a notice, I'd get with my, legal team. We'd go over figuring out what exactly needs to be done. I'd go out to the property and inspect it myself. I'd also get a secondary inspection just to see if there were any suggestions that were needed, because it also depends on the construction of the property, if it's newly built or if it's older. Sometimes we do have to make modifications, but they're more add-ons versus if it was newly built, there might be, say, a certain slope or a certain number of clearance, inches wise, just the dimensions. And so we'd have to get with, our construction team and making sure our vendors are able to, fulfill those requirements, and that way we can get in compliance and make sure everybody has equal access.
Thank you. We are now at the 4:15 hour. We want to say thank you so much for tuning in to Rolling on the Road with Dr. Kimberly and Dave. We want to thank the Deaf of Hard of Hearing for rolling with us. Oh, they have been so faithful over the last 16 months. And we definitely couldn't do what it is that we do if it were not for the support of Disability Advocates of Kent County and 100 Shades of Disability. Today, we are in Hawaii by way of Tucker, Georgia. Yes, our guest has only been in the Atlanta area, Georgia, for about 5 years, but hails all the way from Hawaii. Why she wanted to come to the States, none of us really knows. We have cooties and all kinds of wonderful things happening here. But we are so grateful that she's here. But we want to give a shout out to T.E. Smith, who is watching on today. He is one of our partners. So if you need some law, he is now licensed in the state of Michigan as well as Illinois. And that is SAG Law. You can look them up. Yep. We want to say hello to Bob Hine, Amy Bliley, and to Reverend Linda Siddall. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And thank you so much for Tanji. She is out of the Detroit area. So we have people all over that are watching. So today is Let's Talk About It Tuesday, and we are talking about some commercial spaces, not just, personal spaces. There are many of us, I think that, people say, oh, people with disabilities shop. Absolutely. According to Forbes, persons with disabilities have about $491 billion worth of expendable income. And
Billion?
B with a B. That's actually more buying power than Mr. Bezos. He's only at, I think he's at 192 billion today. He spent some money going to the outer edge of space, so that knocked him down about 3 billion. So as of today, he is not the richest man in the world. He is number 2, but only by like 0.3 billion. Oh my God.
And the challenge with Mr. Bezos is, I don't know how much food he eats, but if he goes to April's food court, he's going to eat supper. Even if he eats a lot of supper, he's going to eat a big supper. But people with disabilities, with that buying power, there's millions of people with disabilities. And those millions of people have millions of family members and friends.
Yes, they do.
And so I'm just going to say, wow, April, we have a lot of great commercial management companies in our area, but I think about every single one of them could use your knowledge, expertise, and commitment to accessibility. And I'm glad we're recording this because it was nice and succinct how you were talking about what you do to make sure folks are not only just complying with the law, but making sure that folks are going to be feeling welcome, taking care of the property. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, if you're willing to move from Hawaii to Georgia, maybe Georgia to Michigan's next. I'm just saying.
We're just saying.
Just saying.
We want to give you some real live questions, or okay. I want to say scenarios. First of all, we want to congratulate Disability Advocates of Kent County for their new podcast called Flattening the Curve, which is a great segue. That there was a program that we had. It was called Curbs and Coffee and Curbs and Cocktails. that we
We're going to
participate.
get back to it now that COVID, we hope, is really gone, but we'll talk about that at the end of the show.
At the end of the show. But one of the things that we would do is find, wonderful places for folks like myself to hang out. The first one that we went to for Curbs and Coffee was a newly remodeled plaza that featured this wonderful coffee house, and they had handicap parking, not even 10 feet away from their front door. However, there was not a ramp to be able to get in. They had 3 stairs to come in, and there was no signage. And so I kind of looked around in my wheelchair, and Pastor Dave comes on out. He goes, well, where do we need to go? I'm not sure. And we looked down. About 100 feet away was a door to get in, and it was a fire door. And as many people know, that if you are in a wheelchair, whether it's manual or motorized, that you're not able to pull open a fire door because of the heaviness. And, if you have any type of weakness, that's going to make it even more difficult. But to try to get in, open the door, get in with your wheelchair without assistance. And then we had to go another 50 to 75 feet to come all the way down around a hallway and come in a back door that takes you into the restaurant.
Wow.
As we go, yeah. So then they told us, as we told them this was not accessible, we don't have signage in the front of our building, right where the door is, 20 feet away from the parking spot. But we do have something all the way in the back. If you come in through our back parking lot, it says handicap, and there is an automatic door that you can push, but you are still about 50 feet away from about 50 to 75 feet away from the restaurant, because you have to come in through a common door and then come through a small hallway that has just kind of like a small little juxtapost, which is a difficult, corner to kind of turn. And then you get another slight turn to try to get into the door of the restaurant. So we said, well, that way isn't nice either.
Yeah.
So how do we handle situations like that when they say, hey, we did comply with ADA because we have signage in the back, we have parking in the back, we have an automatic door in the back? Am I able to ask them to put it at the front door as well?
Oh, absolutely.
And make it available for me to come in a front door? And I think that it sends me a couple of messages. Number one, I'm African American, and how many years did it take for us to be able to come in through a front door? And now you're asking me to come in through a back door again. And then number two, I'm a person with a disability. So that's to me like 2 whammies that I don't want anybody of color or with a different type of ability to come to my restaurant.
Because so April, this building that Dr. Kimberly just described just became part of your portfolio, and you're now in charge of that building. What would you, in a perfect world, how would you address that? What would you like to do?
In a perfect world, say I just took it on, today. I'm going there, I'm doing a property inspection. And like I mentioned before, I'm looking at my checklist, seeing, and so I'm ahead of the game. If that's the case, I'm probably already working on it. I'm checking things on my list to see, are the all areas of the center accessible. I think one difficulty with commercial shopping centers is that the tenant spaces always seem to change. You might have let's say, for instance, a coffee shop, and their lease might be terminated, it might end, so another tenant moves in. And then, it's a constant change as far as the tenants that are coming in and their, as far as, let's say, the door itself. They might do a build out and change, the entire inside of the space. And, that might include the, front door, but it's a portion of their leased premises. And so it is up to the property manager to consistently make sure they're in compliance. And that goes for inside of the space as well. You might go inside of the space and there might be, let's say a carpet that is, a little bit thicker than, and it's causing some issues with clearance. It might be some, bunching issues where, the wheelchair just can't, get in, and just, with having smooth surfaces and things like that. So, when it comes to the tenant, the changes in tenants, I think they all, being that they are the ones that do take care of the interior of the space and the door, sometimes that can be a little bit of, of a challenge. But when I do my inspections, I do still like to, get with my tenants and figure out what it is that we need to do to make sure the center is, compliant, and it all really depends on the actual shopping center itself, based on the layout. So a lot of times, when next year's budget comes up, that's the time to say, hey, we have all these things that, need to be taken care of to really get this center, under, to be accessible. And we may have to put a large portion in our budget to redo all of the sidewalks and make sure that, there is accessibility, redoing the ramps, repainting, just everything that's needed. So it's, like I said, it's definitely at the top of the list when it comes to my inspections. And a little bit of background that you guys don't know, but my first career was in nursing. I did dialysis nursing for 5 years. So I dealt with people from all walks of life. And a lot of people were, in wheelchairs. They were, whether they were amputees, and so that's a little bit of background for me. And I got that hands-on, really, and I learned a lot about just the needs of people in general and being able to help them and what it is that would make them feel most comfortable and just the difficulties in maneuvering, in and out of places, dealing with transportation companies and just seeing, how some of the things that they encountered. And so when I moved into the property management side, it gave me a lot of insight on just what it is that I can do to help them in a different way and make them feel more comfortable and make sure that they have everything that they need to enjoy shopping just like anyone else.
Right.
So let's check the time real quick. It's at 4:27, so we're going to do a commercial break real quick. We want to say thank you so much for tuning in to Rolling on the Road with Dr. Kimberly and Dave. We want to say hello to Brian, who is watching. Again, another Detroiter is on. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we want to say thank you to the Deaf of Hard of Hearing. They have been awesome. They've been rolling with us for the last 16 months. We could not do all that we do without the support of Disability Advocates in Washington County and 100 Shades of Disability. Today we are in Tucker, Georgia, by way of Hawaii. Our guest, April Brown. We are so excited to have her on today. Does somebody hear that noise besides me?
I hear it.
Is it that duck quacking?
You know what? It just might be. Or maybe it's one of April's tenants. I don't know. But we want to say thank you and congratulations to Disability Advocates of Kent County on their new podcast. Yes. Awesome things that are happening around here. But I do have another one. What's the store? Well, can we say the store? We're not sure about the store, but there's a store.
Let's call it Dave's Purple Dog Cafe.
Okay.
Or is it Dave's Purple Dog Clothery?
So Dave's Purple Dog Clothery is a national chain that is in a plaza, and their parking lot had potholes in it. And so they got so many complaints. So many persons in wheelchairs, walkers, crutches, those persons that were visually impaired, had filed so many suits. Of course, they won because of the potholes that were in there. And they repaved the whole parking lot and put in a brand new curb. However, they did not put a curb cutaway in front of the store. They put a curb cutaway 100 feet away. And they said, you know what? You can just go there. Well, first of all, if I'm in a wheelchair and I'm trying to roll through a parking lot 100 feet away from your front door to get in, I believe that is a major hazard, for someone who is blind or, hearing impaired in a wheelchair, in a walker, to go 100 feet in the middle of traffic just to get down to a curb cutaway. And the employees have complained, and this has been for 9 years now. Employees have complained, patrons have complained. They don't stop going, but they definitely have complained. But they know that, hey, if I go here, I'm going to make sure that I have to have someone assist me when I go, because they're going to have to get me up on the curb some kind of way.
Absolutely.
Whoa. How do we help the patrons of that store to get something better from them when every other one of their chain stores has a curb cutaway right in the front? They are the only ones. So can we use, you've got five of your chains here, but this one is the only one. You did spend the money to do the parking lot, so do you think we can get a cutaway as well? What do we need to do?
Yeah. I believe it's a simple conversation of just, saying, hey, this is what's needed. And, as the property manager, if you guys came to me, I'm in charge of, the entire center. So if you guys came to me and said, hey, this is what's needed, we've been, the other stores, this is what they have. And I mean, it's more so us just having to give you guys what it is that you need, to make sure that you have everything, that gives you the accessibility as well. So like you mentioned, the potholes and, I mean, if those things are prolonged, that's an issue. I mean, from the time, and I may notice it first because I'm on property more than, the people that frequent the shopping center. So that's something that I take pictures, and right away, I'm sending my vendor pictures. Hey, this needs to be taken care of. We need to get, make sure there's, because our center, we don't want claims, not, only from the, patrons of the shopping center, but we want to maintain our center. We want to make sure there's, no one that's getting injured, that the entire center is safe. And so, I do have vendors that are inspecting the properties, daily, making sure that, because anything can change. I mean, one day there can be a car that, backs up too fast and didn't see a pole and knocks it down, or signage, there could be handicap signage, and then a delivery truck backs up and they knock down the signage, and now the signage is missing. So I think really staying on top of the maintenance of the shopping center, which is, based on the management team, that's the person that you need to just have that conversation with and tell them, hey, here's our concerns, here's our needs, and you hold them accountable. You make them responsible for making sure that you guys have everything that you need, because, the center has to operate at a certain standard. And I think any, management company, any of the owners, the property owners and landlords would also agree with me as well, as far as the standard of the center. Because without you guys, there's, we don't, there is no center,
Yes,
you guys.
$491 billion.
Yeah.
Yes.
So without you guys, we're nothing. So absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it's over COVID, I think it gave a really, while a lot of the centers were slower, because a lot of people were, doing online orders, and, it gave a lot of property owners a chance to go and actually really look in to the center as far as improvements, things that are needed, because, the foot traffic might have been a little bit slower. And those are just, that downtime when just going to the center and just visiting it and saying, hey, like, what can we do to get the center, it may have been busier. And let's say when I go visit the center, the entire, parking lot is full of cars. So there might be a pothole underneath a car in a parking stall that I just happened to not be able to see because a car was covering it. So now during the COVID, that time period where a lot of people were home, we got a chance to be on our centers a lot more and really, look into things a little bit more in depth and pay more attention to the things that we can do, making sure lighting, if there's lighting upgrades that need to be made just to make it, a little bit more, as far as safety goes, adding, those were the times where, additions, we definitely looked at, okay, what can we do to the parking lot, to make it safer? What can we do to the sidewalks to make it, safer, more accessible, railings and just things that, every center should have. And as we, buy more, properties and we add on to our portfolio, that's one of the first things, that we're looking at as soon as we acquire the property.
Awesome.
Well, I would like to say, if you are in the Kent County area, you can contact Disability Advocates of Kent County. They are a center for independent living, and they can come out and make sure wherever it is that you shop, you live, you enjoy, they can come and check and make sure that is this correct. One of the things that, and again, another personal experience, is Walgreens has a plethora of stores. And one of the things that I noticed is they do have the cutaway sidewalks, but they're in ill repair. So if you are in a wheelchair or if you are using, I call it a seeing stick, it's going to give you misinformation, if you will, or cause you to have a misstep, or you will flip over in your wheelchair like I did. I hit the space was too great between where the parking lot met the curb cutaway, and I flipped backwards in my wheelchair. It flipped me, and just wonderful people that were there came and helped lift me up. And from that day to this one, which has been now about 4 years, they immediately, I got a check within 10 days. They wrote a check to me within 10 days. They had pictures, they had cameras, they wrote a check, but never did the repairs. It's been 4 years later.
Oh, are other people experiencing Dr. Kimberly being frozen?
It looks like she's frozen on my end.
Oh, so she'll get back to that story. And as she was saying about us as disability advocates, we have an awesome accessibility.
So I guess,
Dr. Kimberly, Dr. Kimberly,
are we unfrozen?
You were frozen. Open your visual is still frozen. We heard a little audio. And so I'm going to keep filling it by saying that, hopefully your Center for Independent Living can be that resource that we work with for-profit entities, municipalities on doing accessibility reviews and making recommendations for those changes. So that way, if you're a property manager like April, you go out and you're like, oh, I know something's not right. How do I figure it out the best way? And to work with the uniqueness of us is that we also work with a number of people with disabilities. And as Dr. Kimberly has on her tagline in her email, it's when you include the most excluded, so people with disabilities can help craft those solutions. And here's how best way to do parking, a more convenient way. And the ADA, as we like to say, only slightly sarcastically, is the least you can legally do. And so you can do more. The ADA actually includes a rule that says you can do more, but nobody in the federal government will confirm that your more is equal to or better than the minimum. So most people go to the minimum. And then also, we as disability advocates, we've actually been defense witnesses on behalf of property owners, because again, the tape measure is the tape measure. The level is the level. If it's a 2% cross slope, it doesn't violate the ADA. If it's a 4% cross slope, we're just telling you it's 4%. And then the judge can tell you that violates the law, you know? And so again, we want to be part of the solution. We're not making judgments other than saying this doesn't comply, here's how it can be better. So, you know, again, it's not that we're talking out of both sides of our mouth. It's that we're trying to say, this is, you know, I mean, true story. It was in the spring. We were asked to be, and we chose to be a defense consultant and eventually becoming a defense witness because the property owner wanted to do the right thing. The property owner, you know, unfortunately, it went to a lawsuit before it was brought to their attention. But that being said, yeah, there's a lot more people like April out there who want to do the right thing. There's not as many people who are as knowledgeable as April. I'm going to say that because again, April, your knowledge of how to do it. But again, what I really enjoyed is your presence or your process. You know, like you said, you're going to know it before customers know it. So that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I really try and, you know, make sure that the centers are, you know, just up to standard for anyone. And, you know, that includes disabled, you know, and not, but, you know, giving them the equal access so that, like I said, they're able to enjoy their shopping experience as, you know, the next person can.
Excellent. Hey, as our time's running out, have you dealt with any like just wacky disability accessibility situations? Don't have to name names, but just what's been like one of your funnest victories as it relates to accessibility and knocking down a barrier?
You know, in property management, I will be honest, you never deal with the same thing. You know, every day it's something new. From A to Z, if you can think of it, it has probably happened. I think, you know, I am fortunate to have a really good team and, you know, I have legal in-house as well. So as soon as, you know, something comes up, we put all of our heads together and we're trying to figure out how do we get this taken care of the correct way. And so that, you know, learning experience, so it doesn't happen in the future. I mean, I have 25 shopping centers myself and my portfolio, and you know, each of them are unique in their own way, but making sure that they all are, you know, accessible and, you know, getting out there and getting to those centers and really doing a thorough check to see what's needed. And, you know, my team is really good at construction. We all work together. I have great vendors. And as soon as I'm like, hey, there's a pothole, let's get it fixed. There's a light outage, let's get it fixed.
Awesome.
You know, there's a lip, let's, you know, get my asphalt guy out there, or, you know, concrete repairs, and let's get it taken care of right away. And that's a non-negotiable for me. I'm not worried about, you know, expenses. I'm like, we have to get everything taken care of correctly, because you can't put a Band-Aid on it and then, you know, it's going to come up in the future and now you have to, you know, spend the money all over again to repair it correctly. So I've, you know, seen different people handle it different ways, but, you know, my approach is a little bit different. And like I said, having that background working with disabled firsthand on the medical side, I anticipate the needs before they come up.
Well, and it's one of my favorite bumper stickers is when it comes to disability, you don't get it until you get it. But like, again, you get it, you understand it because you know people by name, a lot of people by name who are going to experience that barrier as a roadblock to enjoying a store or a restaurant or a bar that might be in one of your properties.
Absolutely. I have disabled family members. That's how I look at it. I look at it as if it was a parent or, you know, a sibling that's at the shopping center and they don't have, you know, what they need. And that's something that, you know, it's difficult for me to deal with, you know, if they need to, you know, go and they want to shop and they want to enjoy a smoothie or, you know, a bite to eat, they should have the same accessibility. And so I'm looking at it as if it's my family, you know, shopping and not having that opportunity to, you know, of enjoyment. And so, you know, that's something that I, you know, try and really focus on, you know, when it comes to managing my centers.
I'm just going to say the golden rule isn't how much gold can you have at your bottom line. The golden rule is making sure we're taking care of each other, and you can still have some money at the bottom line. But that again, without bringing faith too much into this, Dr. Kimberly, we'll simply say that, again, that continues to be excellent. Your perspective on this, April, and how you are knocking down barriers and then making sure the barriers stay down. Because even though we think of a barrier as a wall, but a pothole can be a barrier too, and that is a hole. So
we know.
You're filling in the barrier and knocking them down, or knocking them down. So, anyways, Dr. Kimberly, welcome back. Unfortunately, technical difficulties out in Byron.
Yes, but I was watching and listening to the show, and it was great. I have other devices, so I'm just watching.
Good thing we didn't say anything bad about her, April. I didn't know she could listen in on this newfangled contraption called StreamYard.
Oh, yeah. And I have, a plethora of devices that are open right here, so I'm watching and listening. And so as we do come to a close, I think that you said some really great things, but the final question that I need to ask of you is, how do we show other management companies that it is not cost prohibitive for them to make things accessible for persons with varied disabilities? What is the one thing that we can go in and say to them? I did hear you say, hey, we add things to our budget line. We add in repair costs. And so we can say this is a regular maintenance or a repair cost. But can you give us maybe one or two things that we can take with us as a consumer to say, you should do this for me because.
Yeah. I mean, if I can just be completely transparent with you all, I think it's just using the voice. Use that voice as much as you can. I mean, you can never, speak up enough. And like I said, every management company is different, but it's getting their attention, and that whatever that means, taking pictures, emailing, calling, figuring out say, hey, I'll meet you on site and I can show you myself exactly what it is that we need. You guys are very familiar with, the requirements and the need. So I think coming from, another end, a lot of times you being able to come to us with suggestions. Sometimes there's just things, there might be a streamlined way of doing things, and you might have to go a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right based on the property, the location, the center. And that's where you all come into play with, suggestions, and just say, hey, this is what I feel would make us more comfortable. This is what I feel is needed. And then, I think it's partnering and working together, trying to, get those items resolved and make sure that, like I said, you all have that accessibility, because it's really important. But if it's something that maybe we would have never known, if it's not such a black and white, like, okay, but it's something that would make a huge difference to you all. The only way of us knowing is by, you all using that voice and really letting us know, hey, this is what we feel, this is what we need, because otherwise we may or may not know based on, like I said, the inspection. It might be a little bit more than just black and white. When it comes to, what it is that's needed. So I would just suggest, using that voice and reaching out, and utilizing those resources. Of course, no one wants it to get, to a claim or, a suit filed. So we want to work together in the beginning and figure out what we can do so that the problem doesn't come up in the future. Get it done right the first time.
I'm just saying we don't need to encourage Dr. Kimberly to use her voice. She is not a shrinking violet. She is a singing violet to talk about her love of purple. So folks, don't blame me. It was April that encouraged her to use her voice in the community. Not my fault. Okay? I only put her on stage with the governor. She takes it from there. And now April is encouraging her to use her voice. Thanks, April. Thanks.
Thank you, April.
No, in all seriousness, my final word, April, is thank you so much, because I'm not joking. If you need a reference, if you want to move to Michigan and do some property management, let us know, because you are knowledgeable, and for all the right reasons, you're getting the right thing done. So thank you so much for joining us today.
And I just really appreciate you. And I want to say a special thank you to our producer, because he was the one who got you on the show. So we want to say thank you to our producer, whoop, whoop, Mr. Gerard Singh. So we thank you that he has caught the vision, and we just really appreciate you here. And, you know, anytime that you would like to fly here, we would love to have you. And make it a part of our absolutely accessible Kent for next year. That might be a very good one, talking about property management.
Exactly.
And maybe speaking to those who own these wonderful strip malls, just say, hey, you know, persons with disabilities, 491 billion. They have more collective money than Mr. Bezos. So I think we need to pay attention to them.
I have a question for you all. If
Absolutely.
I wanted to find someone in my area that, you know, has a position like you all have, is there a resource that I can reach out to say, hey, do you want to, you know, come with me to my shopping center? Do you want to, let's take a walk, let's have a talk, you know?
Guess what? Dave, me, you, and Jackson can fly down.
Well, but see, this is what I say. I don't have as much fun as I used to. That Jackson and Dr. Kimberly would fly down, but to save on expenses, and unfortunately, Jackson, and no exaggeration, he is so swamped here with business, which is good for us as a nonprofit. You still, you know, can have fee-for-service revenue to fund the mission, but the truest answer is ilru.org. And so ilru.org, and it has a national registry of centers for independent living. And so there's
have it right.
Yeah, there's a map, and so because you mentioned you were multi-state, I'm going to guess you might have a property like in Tennessee or Alabama next door.
Absolutely.
And so you could click on the map on Tennessee and find the CIL.
Yeah. Here it is, right?
Perfect.
I have it on all of mine stuff. So we're gonna go into the private chat, and I'm gonna post it in there for you.
Yeah, so to find that, but again, you can always ask us. In all seriousness, we get phone calls with regularity from who knows where people find our phone number, and we send folks to a CIL. And I just connected to somebody in Phoenix. It's just and you know, Dr. Kimberly and I, we've been coast to coast and north to south on this show, so we've got connections for you, April. But yeah, and there's some really cool groups on the residential side in Atlanta. There's a group called Concrete Change. Okay. I don't know if they're still active, but Concrete Change is fantastic on the issue of visitability in residential construction. So there's but if all else fails, we're putting Dr. Kimberly on an airplane, and she'll head down to Atlanta for a visit with her producer, and she'll be there. And but again, there better be a Center for Independent Living in your neck of the woods that can help.
Absolutely, and it is in the chat, so you have it there. So we want to say thank you so much for tuning into Rolling on the Road with Dr. Kimberly and Dave. Thank you so much to Deaf and Hard of Hearing, to our sponsors, Disability Advocates of Kent County and 100 Shades of Disability, and to our awesome guest today, Miss April Brown. We truly appreciated you. Oh my gosh, what a great show. Thank you so much to our producer. And in the chat, you have the information. But we want to say this is only a comma. We still have a great week planned for you. On tomorrow, can you believe it? We have an African-American male teacher and what it's like for him to teach children with autism. And so I think that's going to be an awesome show. That's on tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Rolling with the Doc. So until tomorrow, make sure that you get vaccinated if you are able to. Please, please wear your mask and respect your fellow neighbor.